That house ain't worth saving anyway, probably a crack den. Fire Captain Rodriguez sneered, deliberately turning his back as orange flames consumed the modest two-story home. The homeowner, DeAndre Washington, stood in his pajamas and slippers, frantically gesturing at the inferno. Rodriguez made an exaggerated show of checking his watch while two other firefighters, Thompson and Miller, laughed and scrolled through their phones instead of prepping equipment. The Mercedes sedan in the driveway meant nothing to them. Neither did DeAndre's desperate pleas. "Sir, please, my family photos. My wife's medical equipment is inside." DeAndre's voice cracked with urgency. "Should have thought about that before moving to this neighborhood," Rodriguez replied, waving him off like an annoying fly. The Ring doorbell across the street captured every dismissive gesture, every cruel laugh, every moment of calculated indifference. Have you ever watched someone dismiss your emergency simply because of how you look? Across the street, Keisha Johnson fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking as she started an Instagram live stream. "Y'all need to see this," she whispered into the camera. "Fire department straight up ignoring this black man's house fire. This is 2025, not 1925. The viewer count climbed steadily. 47, 156, 834. Comments flooded the screen faster than she could read them. "This can't be real. Call the news now. Where is this happening?" 10 minutes had passed since the first truck arrived. DeAndre glanced at his wrist, the subtle gleam of an expensive Patek Philippe watch catching the firelight. The flames had spread to the second floor now, consuming what looked like the master bedroom. Captain Rodriguez stood with his arms crossed, feet planted wide in a stance that screamed dismissal. Thompson continued scrolling through TikTok while equipment sat unused on the truck. Miller made an exaggerated yawning motion, as if this emergency was keeping him from his beauty sleep. All three men positioned themselves with their backs toward DeAndre, a wall of uniformed indifference. "I'm a taxpayer," DeAndre said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "I pay your salaries." Rodriguez let out a bark of laughter. "Yeah, sure you do, buddy. What do? Work at the car wash down on 5th Street? The insult hit like a physical blow, but DeAndre's expression remained controlled. He pulled out his phone, and for just a moment, the screen illuminated his face. Keisha's stream caught a glimpse of his contacts list. One entry read, "Mayor's Office." A crowd of neighbors began gathering on the sidewalk, phones raised, recording everything. Mrs. Chen, the elderly Asian woman from next door, pushed through the growing group. "This is wrong," she shouted at Rodriguez. "Help him! Do your job!" Rodriguez turned to her with practiced condescension. "Ma'am, please step back. We know what we're doing here. This is a professional operation." "Professional?" Mrs. Chen's voice rose. "You've been standing around for 15 minutes." DeAndre reached for his wallet to show identification, and the black American Express Centurion card was briefly visible, a flash of metal that suggested serious wealth. But Rodriguez wasn't looking. None of them were looking. Keisha's live stream exploded with activity. 2,400 viewers now, she announced. "Y'all are witnessing straight discrimination. Share this everywhere." The comments section became a digital riot. "Someone call Channel 7. This is disgusting." "Get this man some help." Shash saved DeAndre's house. Someone in the chat tagged the local news station. Within minutes, the hashtag #SaveDeAndre's was trending locally on Twitter. 12 minutes elapsed, DeAndre said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. His voice cracked slightly as he added, "My late mother's oil paintings are in that front room." Rodriguez shrugged with theatrical indifference. "Insurance will cover it. If you have insurance. You do have insurance, right?" The cruelty of the question hung in the smoky air. DeAndre's jaw tightened, the first real sign of the fury building beneath his composed exterior. Behind Rodriguez, Thompson finally looked up from his phone. "Cap, dispatch is asking about our status." Tell them we're assessing, Rodriguez replied without urgency. No immediate life threat. We might need to prioritize that call in Elmwood instead. Elmwood. The wealthy, predominantly white neighborhood across town. DeAndre walked slowly to his Mercedes, his movements deliberate and controlled. The license plate read City 001, a detail that somehow escaped the firefighters' notice. A small City Hall parking sticker was visible in the corner of the windshield. He opened the trunk and retrieved a black leather briefcase, expensive and official-looking. As he set it on the hood of his car and opened it away from prying eyes, official city documents were briefly visible inside. Then he made a phone call. "Yes, this is Mayor Washington," he said quietly, his back to the crowd. Rodriguez noticed the call but couldn't make out the words over the crackling of flames and growing murmur of the crowd. Something about the man's posture, though, the way he held himself during that conversation, should have been a warning. Keisha's stream had reached 8,900 viewers. The comments were coming so fast they blurred together, a digital scream of outrage and disbelief. 15 minutes now, someone in the crowd shouted. 15 minutes of nothing. DeAndre ended his call and walked back toward the firefighters. His expression was unreadable, but something had shifted in his demeanor. The desperate homeowner was gone, replaced by someone with quiet, dangerous confidence. Rodriguez sensed the change without understanding it. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stay back behind that line," he said, pointing to a spot 50 feet away. DeAndre stopped walking. For a moment, he just stood there, flames reflecting in his eyes. 3 generations of his family had faced moments like this, moments when authority figures looked at their skin and saw something less than human. But tonight was different. Tonight, he had power they didn't know about. The Ring doorbell across the street kept recording. Keisha's live stream kept climbing toward 10,000 viewers, and somewhere in the growing crowd, someone was already calling the news stations. The stage was set for a reckoning that none of them, except DeAndre, saw coming. The wail of sirens announced the arrival of Fire Chief Patricia Hawkins. Her white SUV pulled up with authority, emergency lights painting the scene in red and blue. Rodriguez straightened slightly. His boss was here. DeAndre approached the chief directly, his voice steady but urgent. "Chief, I need your firefighters to do their jobs. My home has been burning for 18 minutes. Hawkins surveyed the scene with practiced eyes. The house was clearly savable with immediate action, but her crew stood around like they were watching a barbecue. Something was off. "Rodriguez, what's the situation here?" she called out. "Routine structure fire, Chief," Rodriguez replied loudly, making sure DeAndre could hear. "No immediate life threat. We're assessing resource allocation protocols." Resource allocation protocols. The bureaucratic language hung in the smoky air like an insult. DeAndre's hands clenched once, briefly, then relaxed. "They've been assessing while my home burns. 18 minutes of assessment." Chief Hawkins looked between her captain and the homeowner. She'd worked with Rodriguez for 6 years. He was competent, if occasionally selective about which emergencies deserved urgency. The department had received complaints before, nothing formal, nothing documented, but whispered concerns about response times in certain neighborhoods. "Sir, I assure you our men are professionals," she said to DeAndre. "They follow established protocols." The word protocols seemed to echo. DeAndre's jaw tightened. Decades of hearing that word used to justify the unjustifiable. Protocols that somehow always worked against people who looked like him. Across the street, Keisha's live stream had exploded to 12,000 viewers. The comments section was a waterfall of outrage. 18 minutes and they're just standing there. This is criminal negligence. Where are the news stations? Share this everywhere. Someone get the NAACP on the phone. This is why we need body cameras on all public servants. As if summoned by the digital fury, a white van with Channel 7 News emblazoned on its side pulled up. Reporter Jessica Martinez stepped out with her camera operator, immediately assessing the situation with professional instincts honed by years of covering discrimination stories. She approached DeAndre first. Sir, I'm Jessica Martinez with Channel 7. Can you tell us what's happening here? Before DeAndre could respond, Rodriguez stepped between them. No interviews. This is an active fire scene. Media needs to stay back behind the perimeter. Martinez raised an eyebrow. Active fire scene where the firefighters were doing nothing? She'd covered enough stories to recognize discrimination when she saw it. 20 minutes elapsed, DeAndre said quietly, checking his Patek Philippe again. The expensive watch caught Martinez's attention. This wasn't some random resident. The Mercedes, the confident bearing, the expensive briefcase, the way he carried himself even in pajamas. Something didn't add up. The crowd of neighbors had grown to nearly 40 people, all recording with their phones. The collective digital witness was undeniable. This story was already spreading beyond local control. Some were live streaming to Facebook, others posting to TikTok. The hashtag #SaveDeAndre's was gaining momentum across multiple platforms. Mrs. Chen pushed through the crowd again, her elderly voice cutting through the noise. "Young man," she called to DeAndre, "I've lived here 40 years, never seen anything like this. They came running when the Hendersons' pool house caught fire last month." The Hendersons. The White family 3 blocks over who'd gotten a full emergency response for a minor shed fire. Rodriguez's radio crackled with increasing urgency. "Unit 47 requesting status update. Elmwood is calling for ETA." He keyed the mic lazily, making a show of his indifference. "Control, we have a residential structure fire. Situation under assessment. May need to redirect resources to the Elmwood call. This one's not going anywhere." Elmwood again. The wealthy neighborhood that somehow always got priority. The casual dismissal wasn't lost on the growing crowd. Officer Jenkins from the city police arrived, his patrol car sliding to a stop behind the fire trucks. Rodriguez had called for crowd control, claiming the residents were becoming unruly. Jenkins stepped out, surveying the scene with growing confusion. The crowd was upset, yes, but they were standing peacefully, recording everything. The only people not working were the firefighters. "Everyone needs to back up behind that line," Officer Jenkins announced, gesturing to a spot that would put DeAndre 50 feet from his own burning home. DeAndre turned to face the officer, his voice remaining controlled. "I'm the homeowner. This is my property." "I understand, sir, but you need to let them work," Jenkins replied, though he glanced at the idle firefighters with growing confusion. He'd worked with this fire crew before. They were usually more responsive than this. "They're not working," DeAndre said simply. The statement hung in the air like an accusation. Chief Hawkins watched the exchange with increasing discomfort. She'd seen Rodriguez handle situations like this before, but something felt different tonight. The crowd was larger, angrier. The media was here. Social media was exploding. And this homeowner, he wasn't backing down like they usually did. There was something about his composure, his confidence, that made her nervous. Thompson finally looked up from his phone again, noticing the cameras. "Cap, that Elmwood call sounds pretty urgent. House fire with possible entrapment." "Yeah," Miller chimed in, stretching dramatically. "Maybe we should head over there instead. This one's probably a total loss anyway." The casual dismissal of DeAndre's emergency was breathtaking in its callousness. Martinez's camera caught every word, every gesture. This would be on the evening news within the hour. Rodriguez positioned a fire truck to block DeAndre's driveway, effectively trapping the Mercedes. The move was deliberate, calculated to demonstrate power. "For your safety, sir, you need to stand behind that line." He pointed to the distant spot with theatrical authority. This was the moment. The peak of institutional power aligned against one man. DeAndre stood at the intersection of every microaggression, every assumption, every time authority had looked at his skin and seen something lesser. But something in his posture suggested he wasn't going to accept it tonight. Keisha's live stream hit 18,000 viewers. Comments were pouring in from across the country now. The hashtag #SaveDeAndre's was trending statewide. Local news stations were getting calls from viewers demanding coverage. Martinez set up her camera for a live broadcast. This is Jessica Martinez reporting from Riverside, where residents are questioning the fire department's response to a house fire that's been burning for over 20 minutes while firefighters appear to be waiting. The camera panned across the scene. Firefighters checking their phones, equipment unused, homeowner forced back from his own property. The visual told the story better than words ever could. Another crash came from inside the house, probably the dining room ceiling collapsing. DeAndre winced but maintained his composure. Family photos, his wife's medical equipment, irreplaceable memories, all burning while these men played power games. 21 minutes, he said aloud, his voice carrying across the crowd. My wife's medical equipment is in there. She's disabled and needs that ventilator. Rodriguez shrugged with practiced indifference. Should have mentioned that earlier, buddy. We can't read minds. The crowd gasped audibly. Even Officer Jenkins looked uncomfortable with that response. Mrs. Chen started crying. DeAndre walked slowly to his Mercedes, opened the trunk, and retrieved his briefcase. Rodriguez noticed but was too confident in his authority to care. What could some resident do to him? He had a badge, a uniform, the backing of the city. This was his scene to control. DeAndre made another quiet phone call. This time, Martinez's camera caught it from a distance, zooming in on his face as he spoke. Yes, this is Mayor Washington, DeAndre said, his voice barely audible over the crackling flames. The words carried on the night air. A few neighbors heard. Martinez heard. Her camera operator heard. Keisha's live stream caught the audio. But Rodriguez was too busy enjoying his power trip to notice the shift in the crowd's energy. DeAndre ended the call and approached the fire truck. Rodriguez had made his final mistake. He'd let his prejudice blind him to obvious warning signs. The license plate, City 001. The expensive car. The confident bearing. The official briefcase. The phone calls. The way he spoke. The way he carried himself even in pajamas and slippers. The Patek Philippe watch. The Black Centurion card. All the clues were there. Rodriguez had just been too blinded by his assumptions to see them. 22 minutes, DeAndre announced to no one in particular. Then he did something that froze everyone in place. He walked directly to the fire truck and opened the equipment compartment with the confidence of someone who had every right to do so. Hey! You can't touch that! Rodriguez shouted, rushing over. DeAndre turned, and for the first time that night, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Actually, he said quietly, I can. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the crackling flames seemed to pause as DeAndre reached into the equipment compartment with practiced authority. Rodriguez stood frozen, his mouth half open in shock at the audacity. Sir, step away from that truck immediately, Chief Hawkins commanded, marching over with her hand on her radio. You're interfering with emergency operations. DeAndre turned slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a black leather wallet. The crowd pressed closer, phones capturing every second. Keisha's live stream viewer count hit 25,000. Actually, Chief Hawkins, DeAndre said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. I'm not interfering. I'm supervising. He opened the wallet and held up an official ID badge. The gold seal caught the firelight, reflecting authority that made everyone lean forward to see. Mayor DeAndre Washington, City of Riverside. The words seemed to echo in the night air. Rodriguez's cocky smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a look of dawning horror. Chief Hawkins stopped mid-stride, her face draining of color. Officer Jenkins straightened his posture so fast he nearly fell over. Holy, Martinez whispered off camera, then caught herself and spoke into her microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we're witnessing something extraordinary. The homeowner he's the mayor of Riverside. Keisha's live stream exploded. Comments flooded the screen faster than the system could display them. He's the mayor! Plot twist of the century. Rodriguez is so fired. I'm dead. He's the actual mayor. This is better than Netflix. Someone call the FBI. The crowd's energy shifted instantly. Gasps rippled through the 40-plus neighbors. Mrs. Chen clapped her hands to her mouth. Someone shouted, "That's our mayor!" Another voice called out, "You idiots, that's Mayor Washington!" A teenager yelled, "This is going viral worldwide!" DeAndre stepped closer to Rodriguez, his calm demeanor now radiating quiet power. The captain was literally shaking, sweat visible on his forehead despite the cold night air. "Captain Rodriguez, you work for me," DeAndre said, his voice steady but carrying absolute authority. "This fire department reports to the city council, which I chair. For 23 minutes, you've let my home burn while questioning whether I deserve city services." Rodriguez stammered, his authority crumbling like ash. "Sir, Mayor, we didn't know. I mean, we were following protocol. This is all a misunderstanding." "Protocol?" DeAndre's voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the calm. "Let me explain the actual protocol, Captain." He opened his briefcase with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. Official city documents were visible inside. Budget sheets, departmental reports, performance evaluations. The symbols of real power, not the borrowed authority of a uniform. "Fire Department annual budget, $47.2 million, DeAndre stated, his voice carrying to the news cameras. "Your salary, Captain Rodriguez, $89,400 annually. Thompson's salary, $62,000. Miller's salary, $58,000. All funded by taxpayers, all overseen by elected officials. Like me." The precision of the numbers was devastating. This wasn't emotional pleading, this was data, and data was power. Chief Hawkins found her voice, though it cracked slightly. "Mayor Washington, we had no idea you lived in this district. Rodriguez, why wasn't this address flagged in our system?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Rodriguez's face reddened as he realized he'd never bothered to check the address against the city's VIP list. He'd made assumptions based on skin color and neighborhood, and those assumptions had just destroyed his career. "The address was flagged," DeAndre said quietly, pulling out his phone to show the screen. "City officials' residences are automatically prioritized in the dispatch system. Alert code 77 Alpha. But your captain here decided my emergency wasn't worth his attention." Martinez's camera caught Rodriguez's expression. The exact moment he realized the magnitude of his mistake. This wasn't just discrimination, it was discrimination against the most powerful person in the city, broadcast live to tens of thousands of viewers. The live stream count hit 31,000 and climbing. The hashtag Mayor Reveal was trending nationally now. News stations across the state were picking up the feed. This story was going viral in real time. Furthermore, DeAndre continued, his lawyer training evident in his systematic dismantling of their position, City Ordinance 847.2 clearly states that failure to provide equal emergency services constitutes a civil rights violation. Federal investigation is mandatory. Personal liability exposure extends to department leadership. The legal terminology landed like body blows. Chief Hawkins visibly winced at each phrase. Federal investigation. Personal liability. These weren't just employment consequences, these were potential criminal charges. DeAndre pulled out his phone and made another call, this one deliberate and public. "City Attorney's Office. This is Mayor Washington. I need a full legal review of tonight's emergency response. Yes, civil rights implications. Federal oversight may be necessary. DOJ Civil Rights Division should be notified immediately." The words sent a chill through the emergency responders. Federal oversight meant investigations, audits, potential loss of funding. Rodriguez's breathing became visible in the cold night air. Thompson and Miller exchanged panicked glances. They'd been laughing and joking 20 minutes ago. Now they were facing federal civil rights charges. Miller actually put his hand to his chest as if having a heart attack. "Sir, Officer Jenkins stepped forward, his voice respectful now. I apologize for any misunderstanding. If you need anything, I was just responding to the crowd control request. DeAndre nodded acknowledgement but kept his focus on the fire department. Chief Hawkins, I assume you can explain to federal investigators why your department discriminated against the mayor's residents? Why response time was 600% longer than protocol requires? No, sir, absolutely not, Hawkins replied quickly, her voice rising in panic. This is completely unacceptable. Rodriguez, Miller, Thompson, you're all suspended pending investigation. I want full suppression efforts started immediately, everything we've got. Suddenly, the idle firefighters sprang into action like a choreographed dance. Equipment that had sat unused for 23 minutes was deployed with desperate efficiency. Hoses unrolled, ladders extended, foam dispensers activated. The transformation was remarkable and telling. Interesting, DeAndre observed, watching the frantic activity. Amazing how quickly protocols can be followed when careers are at stake. Where was this urgency 20 minutes ago? Martinez approached with her camera, sensing the story of her career. Mayor Washington, can you comment on what happened here tonight? DeAndre looked directly into the camera, his composure absolute. Ms. Martinez, tonight illustrates why systematic bias training is essential for all public servants. When emergency responders prejudge citizens based on appearance, public safety suffers. He gestured toward his burning home, where firefighters were finally working to save what remained. Every resident deserves equal protection under the law, regardless of race, neighborhood, or perceived social status. That's not just policy, it's basic human decency. Rodriguez realized he needed to attempt damage control. Sir, Mr. Mayor, we'll file a complete incident report. This was just a miscommunication. Maybe some confusion about protocols. A miscommunication? DeAndre's eyebrows raised slightly. You called my home probably a crack den. You suggested I worked at a car wash. You mocked my disabled wife's medical emergency. You literally turned your back on me while my house burned. That wasn't miscommunication, Captain. That was conscious, deliberate discrimination. The livestream audience watched Rodriguez crumble in real time. His fellow firefighters avoided eye contact, suddenly busy with equipment they'd ignored for 20 minutes. The power dynamic had completely reversed. Chief Hawkins stepped forward, her damage control instincts kicking in. Mayor Washington, I take full responsibility for this incident. We'll implement immediate reforms, additional training, policy reviews. You'll do more than that, DeAndre interrupted, his voice cutting through her desperation. You'll explain to the Justice Department why your response time to the mayor's residence was 6 times longer than protocol requires. You'll explain why your personnel felt comfortable using discriminatory language in front of news cameras and live streams. The weight of federal investigation settled over the scene like smoke. Rodriguez's career wasn't just over. Criminal charges were possible. Civil rights violations carried serious penalties, including potential federal prison time. Keisha's live stream had reached 42,000 viewers. Comments were pouring in from across the country, with civil rights organizations already sharing the video. The NAACP had been tagged. The ACLU was being notified. This wasn't just a local story anymore. It was a national conversation about systemic bias in emergency services. Mrs. Chen pushed through the crowd again, this time with purpose. Mr. Mayor, she called out, I've got video too. Ring doorbell caught everything from the beginning. 24 minutes of them doing nothing while your house burned. The additional documentation was another nail in Rodriguez's coffin. Multiple camera angles, time-stamped footage, independent witnesses. This was an airtight case. But there's something else you should know, DeAndre continued, his voice carrying a hint of satisfaction. I've been timing this entire incident with precision. He held up his Patek Philippe, the expensive watch now an instrument of accountability. Emergency response protocols require 4-minute response times for structure fires. You've had 24 minutes. Average property loss increases 15% for every minute of delay. The mathematical precision of his words carried more weight than any emotional appeal. This was data, documentation, evidence that would hold up in any court. My home's assessed value, $2.4 million. Your delay has cost the city approximately $700,000 in preventable damage. That comes from the same budget that pays your salaries, Chief Hawkins. Insurance claims affect our municipal liability rates. Rodriguez's face went white. Financial liability added another layer to his legal problems. The city would likely sue him personally for the additional damages caused by his discrimination. DeAndre closed his briefcase with finality. Chief Hawkins, I expect a full incident report on my desk by 8 a.m. Include response times, personnel behavior, witness statements, and all body camera footage. The footage better not be mysteriously corrupted. Yes, sir. Absolutely, Hawkins replied, already calculating how to minimize the department's exposure while knowing it was likely impossible. The firefighters were finally making progress on the blaze, but it was too little, too late. The second floor was mostly gone, though the first floor, and his mother's paintings, might be salvable. DeAndre looked at Rodriguez one final time. Captain, you made assumptions about my worthiness for city services based on my appearance. Tonight, those assumptions met accountability. I hope the lesson serves the next citizen who needs your help. Rodriguez opened his mouth to respond, then thought better of it. Anything he said would be recorded, live-streamed, and used against him later. The crowd was cheering now, phones raised high, documenting the complete reversal of power. This wasn't just justice. It was transformation. A moment when the system's bias was exposed and accountability was immediate and devastating. And Rodriguez? DeAndre added quietly, his voice carrying just enough for the cameras to catch. You were right about one thing. You do work for me, just not for much longer. The next few minutes would determine careers, budgets, and the future of emergency services in Riverside. DeAndre understood this was no longer about his house. It was about systemic change that could protect every citizen who might face similar discrimination. He opened his briefcase fully, spreading official documents across the hood of his Mercedes like a war room. The firelight illuminated budget sheets, policy manuals, and legal statutes. This was government action, accountability in real time. Chief Hawkins, let's discuss the financial implications. DeAndre began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd run budget meetings for years. The fire department receives 23% of our annual municipal budget. That's $10.8 million specifically allocated for emergency response. The precision of the numbers was devastating. Hawkins realized she was facing someone who knew exactly how much power he wielded. Your department's federal grants total $8.3 million annually. DeAndre continued, consulting his documents. Community development block grants, FEMA preparedness funding, staffing for adequate fire and emergency response grants. All require compliance with federal civil rights laws. Each funding source was another nail in the department's coffin. Federal money came with federal oversight, and federal oversight meant investigations. Civil rights violations void federal funding eligibility, DeAndre stated flatly. That's 40% of your operational budget, Chief. How do you plan to maintain services with a 40% budget cut? Hawkins went pale. The math was simple and brutal. Without federal funding, she'd have to lay off half her department. The political implications would destroy her career. Rodriguez finally found his voice, desperation making him reckless. Sir, this is all being blown out of proportion. We were just being cautious, following safety protocols. Safety protocols? DeAndre's eyebrows raised. Let me read from the actual policy manual. He pulled out an official fire department handbook, dog-eared from use. Section 4.7. Response times to structure fires shall not exceed 4 minutes from dispatch. Section 12.3. All emergency calls receive equal priority regardless of location or caller demographics. The quotes were devastating because they came from the department's own rules. Rodriguez had violated written policy, and everyone knew it. Furthermore, DeAndre continued, City Ordinance 847 clearly states that discriminatory emergency response constitutes a federal civil rights violation. Penalty includes individual liability for damages, termination, and potential criminal charges. Martinez's camera caught every word. This wasn't just a news story, it was a legal proceeding broadcast live to 48,000 viewers. The hashtag #FireDepartmentAccountability was trending nationally. DeAndre's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it and smiled slightly. I just received confirmation from the city attorney's office. The Justice Department's Civil Rights Division has been formally notified. Federal investigators will be here within 72 hours. The words hit like a physical blow. Federal investigators meant careers would end, policies would be rewritten, and oversight would be permanent. This wasn't going away quietly. Chief Hawkins, you have two choices, DeAndre said, his voice steady but implacable. Option 1. Implement immediate comprehensive reforms. Mandatory bias training for all personnel. Independent oversight committee with community representation. Body cameras required for all emergency responses. Random response time audits by civilian monitors. The demands were specific and non-negotiable. Hawkins realized she was facing someone who'd already thought through the solutions. Option 2, DeAndre continued. Explain to federal investigators why your department systematically discriminates against minority communities. Defend your budget allocation before a congressional oversight committee. Watch your federal funding disappear permanently. The ultimatum was elegant in its simplicity. Reform or face destruction. There was no middle ground. Keisha's live stream was now approaching 55,000 viewers. Comments poured in from civil rights organizations, politicians, and ordinary citizens who recognized the historic nature of the moment. This is how you create change. Data over drama, brilliant strategy. Every mayor should be this prepared. Rodriguez is done, career suicide on live TV. Chief Hawkins understood she was witnessing her own department's transformation in real time. Mayor Washington, we accept option 1. Full reforms, immediate implementation. Whatever you require. Good, DeAndre replied, pulling out a tablet and opening a document. I've prepared a preliminary reform package. Mandatory quarterly bias training developed by civil rights experts. Response time tracking software with a public dashboard. Community oversight board with subpoena power. The speed of his response revealed this wasn't improvised. He'd been planning systematic reforms for months, waiting for the right moment to implement them. Additionally, DeAndre continued, new hiring practices, diversity requirements for all positions, residency requirements ensure firefighters live in the communities they serve, performance reviews tied to response time data and community feedback. Each reform was a dagger aimed at the institutional bias that had allowed tonight's discrimination. Rodriguez realized his entire worldview was being systematically dismantled. The technology solution is already developed, DeAndre added, showing his tablet screen to Martinez's camera. The Riverside Response Tracker app, citizens can monitor emergency response times in real time, automatic alerts for delays, public performance dashboard updated hourly. The app interface was sleek, professional, and clearly ready for deployment. This wasn't a concept. It was a finished product waiting for implementation. Accountability through transparency, DeAndre explained to the camera. When response times are public, discrimination becomes impossible to hide. When communities can track performance, standards improve automatically. Rodriguez made one final desperate attempt to salvage something. Sir, what about due process? Union contracts? We have rights. DeAndre's expression didn't change, but his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Captain Rodriguez, you forfeited those rights when you violated citizens' civil rights. Your union can negotiate your severance package, but your employment with the city ends immediately. The finality was crushing. No appeals, no second chances, no gradual consequences. Rodriguez's career died with those words. Furthermore, DeAndre continued, personal liability extends beyond employment. The city will pursue damages for preventable property loss. Your discriminatory actions cost taxpayers $700,000. Insurance adjusters are already documenting the scene. The financial consequences were staggering. Rodriguez faced personal bankruptcy on top of career destruction. His pension, his home, his future, all jeopardized by 20 minutes of prejudice. Officer Jenkins, who had remained quietly professional throughout the incident, stepped forward. Mayor Washington, I want to formally apologize for any role in this situation. I responded to a crowd control request without understanding the full context. DeAndre nodded approvingly. Officer Jenkins, your conduct tonight was professional once you understood the situation. That's exactly the kind of adaptability we need from all public servants. The contrast was stark. Jenkins showed how public servants should behave when confronted with new information. Rodriguez showed how prejudice and pride led to destruction. Chief Hawkins, DeAndre said, returning to the business of reform, I want the new policies implemented within 30 days. Training programs starting immediately. Technology deployment by month's end. Community Oversight Board established within 60 days. The timeline was aggressive but achievable. Hawkins nodded rapidly, already calculating how to meet the demands while salvaging what remained of her department's reputation. The federal investigation will proceed regardless, DeAndre continued, but cooperation and proactive reform will be noted in their report. Resistance or delay will result in federal takeover of department operations. The message was clear. Change voluntarily or have change imposed by federal authorities. Either way, the discrimination would end. Martinez approached with her camera, recognizing the historic nature of the moment. Mayor Washington, this appears to be real-time policy reform. Can you comment on the broader implications? DeAndre looked directly into the camera, his composure absolute despite everything he'd lost tonight. Miss Martinez, tonight proves that accountability and data defeat discrimination more effectively than anger or violence. When public servants face real consequences for bias, behavior changes immediately. He gestured toward the firefighters, who were now working frantically to save what remained of his home. This is how systematic change happens, not through protests or petitions, but through institutional accountability backed by legal authority. The live stream audience was witnessing government transformation in real time. This wasn't theory or policy debate. It was practical change implemented by someone with both the power and knowledge to enforce it. Every community deserves equal protection, DeAndre continued. Tonight's reforms ensure that no family will face what mine faced. That's not vengeance. That's justice. Rodriguez stood silently, his career and future destroyed by his own prejudice. Thompson and Miller avoided eye contact, knowing their own jobs hung by threads. Chief Hawkins frantically took notes, already planning damage control. The corporate showdown was over. DeAndre had won completely, not through aggression or emotion, but through systematic application of authority backed by legal knowledge and moral clarity. The fire was finally under control, but the real inferno, the systematic burning away of institutional bias, was just beginning. 3 months later, the Riverside Fire Department looked nothing like the organization that had let DeAndre Washington's home burn. The transformation was as complete as it was swift, proving that real change was possible when accountability met determination. Captain Rodriguez was gone, his termination finalized within a week of the incident. The federal investigation had uncovered a pattern of delayed responses in minority neighborhoods, costing him his pension and resulting in personal bankruptcy. He faced ongoing civil lawsuits from 3 other families who'd experienced similar discrimination. Thompson and Miller kept their jobs, but underwent 6 months of intensive bias training. Their body camera footage from that night was now used in training programs nationwide, showing exactly how prejudice destroyed professional judgment. Both men had become unlikely advocates for reform, speaking openly about their transformation. Chief Hawkins had surprised everyone by embracing the changes. "I thought I was running a good department," she told Martinez in a follow-up interview. "The mayor showed me we were failing half our community without even realizing it." The technology solution had exceeded all expectations. The Riverside Response Tracker app had been downloaded 89,000 times, becoming a model for cities nationwide. Average response times had improved by 34% across all neighborhoods. When performance was public, excellence became automatic. The Community Oversight Board met monthly in DeAndre's rebuilt home office. Mrs. Chen served as vice chair, her sharp eye for detail keeping the department honest. "We're not here to punish," she often said. "We're here to protect everyone equally." The reforms had created a ripple effect beyond emergency services. The police department voluntarily adopted similar oversight measures. The city's building inspection division implemented bias training after community complaints. Systematic change was spreading through every level of government. DeAndre's home had been rebuilt with universal accessibility features for his wife. The insurance payout, combined with the city's liability settlement, had actually improved their living situation. His mother's paintings were restored and now hung in a fireproof safe room, a reminder of what had been saved and what had been learned. The financial impact on the department had been significant but manageable. Federal grants had actually increased after the reforms, with the Justice Department citing Riverside as a model for civil rights compliance. The investment in accountability had paid dividends in both funding and community trust. Martinez had won a Pulitzer Prize for her coverage of the incident. The live stream footage had been viewed 12.3 million times, sparking similar reforms in 47 cities. "Sometimes justice happens in real time," she said in her acceptance speech. "Sometimes accountability is immediate." The federal investigation had concluded with commendations for the city's proactive response. Rather than punitive action, the Justice Department had designated Riverside as a demonstration site for bias-free emergency services. Federal funding had increased by 23%. New hiring practices had transformed the department's demographics. The latest recruit class was 52% minority, with all candidates required to pass comprehensive bias awareness testing. Residency requirements ensured firefighters understood the communities they served. The quarterly community forums had become standing-room-only events. Citizens regularly praised response times and professionalism. Complaint rates had dropped 78%, while service satisfaction scores reached historic highs. Trust, once broken, was being systematically rebuilt. Keisha had parlayed her viral live stream into a career in citizen journalism. Her Community Watch series monitored public services across the region, keeping officials accountable through the power of social media documentation. She often said the night changed her understanding of how democracy actually worked. The Response Tracker app had evolved into a comprehensive government transparency platform. Citizens could monitor everything from pothole repairs to permit processing times. Real-time accountability had become the new standard for public service. DeAndre's leadership style had transformed the entire city government. Department heads now came to budget meetings with detailed equity analyses. Policy proposals required community impact assessments. The mayor's quiet insistence on data-driven accountability had revolutionized municipal operations. The story had become a case study in Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. The Washington model was taught as an example of how individual leadership could catalyze institutional change. Students analyzed how personal crisis had become systematic reform. Rodriguez's fate served as a cautionary tale throughout the public sector. His discriminatory actions had cost him everything: career, pension, home, reputation. The consequences were so severe that they deterred similar behavior across multiple departments and agencies. The night's events had also strengthened DeAndre's political position. His re-election margin had been the largest in city history, with unprecedented support from both minority and white communities. Voters had witnessed true leadership under pressure and responded accordingly. The disabled community had particularly benefited from the reforms. Emergency response protocols now included specific training for assisting residents with mobility issues, medical equipment, and other accessibility needs. DeAndre's wife had become an advocate for inclusive emergency planning. Most importantly, the systematic changes had prevented similar incidents. Response time disparities between neighborhoods had been eliminated. Bias complaints had dropped to near zero. The fire department's transformation from symbol of discrimination to model of equality was complete. The intellectual victory had proven more lasting than any emotional response could have been. By channeling his anger into systematic reform, DeAndre had protected not just his own family, but every family that might face similar discrimination in the future. Justice hadn't just been served, it had been institutionalized. 2 years after that October night, DeAndre Washington stood in the same spot where Rodriguez had dismissed his emergency. But now he wasn't alone. Behind him, a diverse group of firefighters conducted a community safety demonstration, their professionalism a stark contrast to the discrimination that had once defined this department. The transformation was complete, but the lessons were eternal. DeAndre had proven that dignity, data, and determination could defeat discrimination more effectively than anger ever could. His calm, systematic response had turned personal injustice into community-wide protection, creating a model that cities worldwide were now implementing. These are the real-life stories that matter most, touching stories of how one person's quiet strength can transform entire systems. Black stories like DeAndre's remind us that true power lies not in retaliation, but in systematic accountability that protects everyone who comes after. The mayor's approach had been studied by civil rights organizations across the nation. He demonstrated that when bias meets intelligence backed by institutional authority, change becomes inevitable. His story had become required reading in public administration programs, teaching future leaders that documentation, data, and legal knowledge were more powerful than any emotional response. The Riverside model had spread to 127 cities. Emergency response discrimination had dropped 67% in communities that implemented similar oversight systems. The technology platform had evolved into a comprehensive government accountability suite, monitoring everything from police response to school resource allocation. Rodriguez's career destruction had become a cautionary tale shared in training programs nationwide. His 20 minutes of prejudice had cost him everything: career, pension, reputation, financial security. The consequences were so severe, they'd created a deterrent effect that prevented countless similar incidents. Most importantly, DeAndre's wife had never again worried about emergency response during her medical episodes. The systematic changes had ensured that disability, race, and neighborhood could never again determine the quality of emergency care. That personal peace was worth more than any revenge could have provided. The fire department now led the region in community trust scores, response times, and diversity metrics. What had begun as discrimination had become excellence through accountability. The transformation proved that a crisis could catalyze positive change when met with strategic leadership rather than reactive emotion. These life stories of systematic change inspire us because they show what's possible when we channel outrage into action, fury into reform, and personal pain into community protection. DeAndre's story wasn't just about one man's vindication. It was about creating a world where such vindication would never again be necessary. The mayor often reflected that the hardest moments reveal who we truly are. That night, faced with institutionalized bias and burning personal loss, he'd chosen systematic justice over immediate satisfaction. The choice had protected not just his family, but every family that would need emergency services in the decades to come. Real change happens when we document discrimination, demand accountability, and build systems that prevent future bias. DeAndre Washington's story proves that one person with knowledge, authority, and moral clarity can transform institutional culture permanently. Your voice matters in these conversations. Have you witnessed discrimination in public services? Have you seen bias affect emergency response in your community? Share your stories in the comments below. Record injustice safely when you see it. Support victims courageously when they need advocates. Demand systematic change persistently until it arrives. Subscribe to Black Voices Speak for more stories of quiet strength overcoming systematic bias. Together, we transform communities one conversation, one story, one act of documented accountability at a time. Your engagement makes these stories reach the people who need to hear them most. Hit that notification bell, share this story, and let's build a world where everyone receives the respect and service they deserve.